Hello! After reorganising and getting up to date my watercolour collection over the last couple of days, I thought I'd show you the different travel palettes that I've got, which some of these will be going back into. So in my previous video I showed how I organise all my watercolours, but basically they're in metal pencil tins and they've got a magnet on the bottom and they're easily transferable to travel palettes. The first kind of travel palettes I'll look at then are ones which you can fit half and full pans into. Most professional brand half pans and whole pans are roughly the same size across the different brands, and so on the whole they fit into these kinds of palettes. These ones are definitely on the larger size of what I'd call a travel palette, and this first is just your standard metal palette with bars attached in them, which the paint pans clip into. My pans are a little bit deeper because of the magnet that I've put on, and so they don't quite fit under these clips, but they magnetise in fine. This is just a generic one, which you can find pretty much anywhere. And it's got the centre aisle for your brush. The pans, if you wanted to fit more pans in, they don't fit in upright, but they do fit in sideways. So you can get a really good number of paints in one of these. And this is the same thing again, but with 4 rows instead of 2, with the centre aisle. And just to mention, this part with the trays on does lift out. So in theory you could just glue pans straight into here with glue gun or something if you wanted to fit more in. And then this paint palette, it's got the same size footprint, but it's got an extra full size row built in. So in this you could fit 35 whole pans if you wanted to. And I originally got this for my Roman Schmincke paints until they outgrew it. So onto the smaller ones. This is exactly the same thing as what we've just looked at, and I think they're great. They're cheap and widely available. This particular one is one that I got with my first Gallo half pan paint set, and this has been the main palette which I've used for, I don't know, maybe 18 months now, and you can see it's starting to rust a bit. But this has taken such a battering. It's come everywhere with me. It's got dents and everything in. And I'm not careful at all with the stuff that I take out and about with me. I fill the middle aisle as well. So for me this holds 20 half pans. Then this lovely Schmincke one caught my eye. I bought it when it was on sale and it came with some watercolours. And I could fit 21 paints in this one, so only one more than this, though I would have space for a travel brush in it. I do love the look of it. I like the fact that you've got more individual mixing wells, but I haven't used it yet, and partly I think that's because I don't like the feel of it. For some reason, even though Schmincke are a good brand, they've left this main portion with the sides unrolled. So it's not sharp, but it's not particularly comfortable to hold, compared with the cheapy one, which has rolled metal here. This is just so much more pleasant feel on your thumb. And also, I don't like how this is kind of balanced. It doesn't sit completely flat. This one's got a thumb ring in the back of it, and then it's got lowered areas, so it feels very, very stable when it's lying flat. This one's got the thumb ring and it's got these 4 feet to kind of compensate for the space that the thumb ring takes up, but it still doesn't lie flat. It kind of bounces a bit. Yeah, so it It's strange how small things can put you off a product, and whether you've consciously acknowledged it or not, you just kind of know you don't particularly want to use a certain thing, and that's how I feel about this one, which is a shame because I think it looks beautiful. And it is significantly heavier than this one, like more than I would have thought it would weigh more, given how much bigger it is, if that makes sense. I'm going to leave this one in the top corner of the screen while I talk about all the others, because it's such a well-known size. It gives a good idea of relative size. So next is this Schmincke kind of whiskey palette. So it's metal construction, and it's got the little lid which stays on. It's kind of held on with these two little dimples, and then you've got a nice water container area there. And inside you can fit 12 half pans. In this one you put them sideways on, like that, and then you're left with a gap which you fill with these kind of rods, and they clamp everything in place. So I love the theory of this one, and I really love the look of it, but again it's got the same problem that it's just not stable. I mean, that kind of doesn't move at all, and this one kind of rocks. And it's the same problem. You've got the thumb ring and you've got the 4 feet, but the feet aren't tall enough to compensate for the height of the thumb ring. And again, you've got the kind of sharper edges. There's no rolled metal in it. And the other thing I found when I was playing around with it a little bit at the beginning is that this water container falls off really easily. It doesn't hold on. And that clicks on the side there. So again, a very pretty palette, but in my opinion, not very well designed. I'm not going to do a full review here where I weigh all the palettes and give the dimensions of them and stuff. This is just a quick run through of the pros and cons in my mind of the palettes that I've got. And then next is the portable painter. So that's one. In fact, I think this is one of the very few issues I've got with this palette, is that the clip just kind of slides off really easily. So the case turns into water containers or paintbrush holders, and then you've got the central part which opens out and slides into the legs. And you get a band on one of them which I just tuck the clip into so it doesn't get lost. I used this palette a fair bit when I first got it, and I really quite like it. Although the paints are raised up, that didn't seem too inconvenient to me, and it feels nice and stable. You've got a good amount of mixing space, which folds out nice and flat. And all my different pans fit into it. They're quite snug when you get them out again. When you first get it, there's a tray here which will hold smaller travel brushes, but I've filled that in with these extra little palettes that you can buy. These obviously aren't standard half pans, so I will need to fill these up with paint from a tube. So I'll pick my most commonly used paints for these 6, and then I can still swap the other ones. Yeah, it just feels nicely made. One other problem though with it is that when you're finished, these are going to be wet with your paint water, and so unless you dry them out thoroughly with paper towels or something, you're going to get the outside of your palette a mess. So I think this is a nice product if you bear in mind the couple of things I've pointed out. Then I've also got this Winsor and Newton, I think it's called the Field Kit, and it comes in navy, but also this white version. And this has your water storage, your mixing pot and mixing trays all built in. So there's a removable water container there. You can get the Cotmans student range of paints in this, or you can get it with the professional watercolour paints. I'd found this really, really cheap with the Cotman paints in, and I just sold the paints on eBay so that they'd get some use, because I don't really like those paints. When you buy it, there's a central kind of swing down arm which acts as a divider between the paints, and you can fit 12 in here, or more if you want to take out the sponge and fit 2 in there. But I rather inelegantly hacked off the bar and I put magnet in the bottom so that I can just put my own ones in. So it leaves me with a slight gap at the side, so I've just got this paper or cardboard wedge which I fit down the side, and that holds everything into place without them moving around at all. It also came with a brush, but I've got rid of that because I've got a pet hate about those miniature brushes. They're just awful for my way of painting, and they don't hold very much water. So this palette's a pretty good one. It's quite compact in that it's got all your water storage, water, and something to dab your brush on. I mean, comparing it to this, I still need to take some water and something to wash my brush in. So it's smaller, well, it's more compact when you look at it this way. I will say now, I could do things more compactly if I just used a water brush, but I really, really don't like using them. So even when I'm taking a tiny kit, I'll still take some water and a water pot. And the last paint palette that I've got, which holds regular pans, is this Portable Painter Micro. And I really like this. It feels nice quality. I mean, it's all plastic, but it feels pretty robust. So the bottom of the container becomes a water pot. You've got water palette there, and then the lid becomes, whoops, if I can, oh, wrong end. So you've got quite a nice little setup there. It's got a holder on the back, and then space for 6 half pans, though you can get extra insets which divide up your pan space. I've got these 4 paints in it now because they're duplicates from my main palette, so they could stay in there. And then I stick this card on the bottom just so I know what paints I've got in there. The set does come with like little glue dots on the bottoms of the pans, but I've taken those off. Once you've got the other 2 in, they stay in pretty well. So when I want to do my small painting setup, I'd have my smallest sketchbook, there is a right and a wrong way to put the lid on, but that's my only minor niggle on it. And then I take a water dish and some water and a travel brush. So it's not the tiniest setup, but but this is the kind of bag I'd throw on if I'm just going for a walk, and these will easily fit into here along with the phone, so that suits me fine. I've also used this one for painting in the car. So the first few paintings in here, there it is. The first few paintings in here were all painted just with the 6 colours in this one. And this is one that I painted in the car with it. Oops. That was painted on the beach in France with it. I was in the car doing that one. And then these others, I think I used different palettes for those. So that's all my palettes which hold pans. And then I've got a variety of palettes which you fill yourself from watercolour tubes. Plus I've got a couple which paint came in. And I'll just get those out of the way quickly. So this is the Derwent Line and Wash paint pan set. And this is a really nice one actually. Although they're not what I'd class as true watercolours, it's a good little set. In your bright colours, you've got Inktense paints, which are very high staining ones. And then you've got a few Graphitints in what I think are the nicest colours from the Graphitint range, like Ocean Blue, Meadow, Port. Then you've got a couple from the Pastel Derwent range, Storm Grey and Artichoke, which are really nice. So I thought I'd just show you that one. And then for Christmas, I've got this set from Beam Paints in Canada, and this comes with a fountain pen and a travel brush, and then some of what they call the paint stones, which is paint kind of wrapped in kind of a waxed cloth or something. I've had to move this cloth around a bit to protect the paints from this lining because it's like black velour velvety stuff, and little bits of black come off and get into the paint, which is a nuisance. So perhaps not the best design, but nice products apart from that. I'll stick this one in shot again for the size comparison. So this is one of my first paint palettes I put together, and I bought this palette from Amazon pretty cheaply. It comes with a removable mixing tray. And it did come with some paints in it, but they weren't very nice. And I'd planned on kind of gouging them out anyway and putting my own tube paints in them, which I did. This system is pretty similar to the Sakura Koi watercolour sets. I used to have one of those, in as much as the legs fit in these little holes. So you can have your paint palette or your mixing palette on any side you want. And you've got space for these sponges and a water brush. I'll link to these items down below in the description box. But these individual holders come out, and these are actually interchangeable with the ones in the Derwent set. They fit in. One thing, I know I've tried it in the past, but I can't remember. I can't remember if these, I think these are smaller than normal half pans. Oh, they fit in, but my half pans have kind of got tapered edges, and so the top width doesn't fit into these. It's not just my magnet that's stopping them going down any further. It's the actual wider part at the top. So there's that one, 24 in. And I quite liked that. I've got no complaints about that really. And then I've got my most recent palette, which is the Bowerbird one. And it's slightly bigger, just ever so slightly bigger than as the standard one. And you've got the mixing tray, But this one has got a ceramic palette in it and 18 paint wells. And I do like this. The wells aren't too small, though only my smaller travel brushes fit in here, like this silver black velvet one, or my smaller Princeton Neptunes. I haven't taken this one outside with me anywhere, but it's nice for using around the house if I want to go and paint sitting on the settee or in bed or something. And then while we're on the subject of ceramic ones, Etchr were kind enough to send me this one. I'll just show you the depth of it. So a little bit deeper than a standard palette and quite heavy. So you get a kind of a swatch circle and you've got 2 layers of ceramic with like felt discs in between. So this one holds 19 colours, or more if you wanted to use the mixing dish. But they do one with even smaller wells. I think this one is on the limit of how small I would want the wells to be. I feel like I can only do smaller paintings with this. It's quite a pleasing little palette though, when I paint with it, and I have used it a fair bit and refilled these paints. I kind of just hold it in my hand like that. I've painted with this one in bed quite a bit actually, and use a smaller brush, and yep, quite like it. And I don't feel like it's too fragile. It feels fairly well packed up. Although I haven't, I would be, I think, pretty happy taking that anywhere. It's just a shame that the design's scraped off quite easily, because I haven't even had this out and about very much. I also experimented with using an altoid tin. I've got my original little paint swatch card that I did with it. So with the magnet bottoms, they fit in quite nicely, don't move around. And you can fit 14 in there. I also used a piece of Yupo paper, which is like waterproof paper that I use with alcohol inks, and put it in the lid for a mixing area. But I found that I didn't really enjoy using this as a palette. I prefer to have more of a mixing area, or at least have my mixing area divided up so that I can have a few different colours on the go at once without merging too much. Then I've also got this Nomadic artist palette, and this is like business card holder size. It's got white on the inside for a mixing surface, and then you've got these magnetic, very narrow little pans inside. I quite like this long shape because you can fit a whole kind of brush comfortably in there. I use this as a supplementary palette, so it's got my main favourite granulating paints in it, and I'll just take this along when I'm using this if I want more of a selection. I don't think I'd ever use this as a palette just on its own though, for the same reason as I didn't like the altoid tin, and that's because there's no kind of divided mixing space, and I've just found that that's something that I really like having. I think there's an American brand that does a similar design to this and has different sizes of palette and also of pans. It's quite a pleasing little thing though, and it's got a very satisfying click. It doesn't matter what size palette I've got, I always want to have a swatch chart with me. I just like knowing the exact colour I'm using. Then these little wooden palettes have become available quite widely. And they've got little magnets in them. So that closes onto there. It's not super strong. I keep it with an elastic band around, and I've taken this out a few times. I think I took this out just in my pocket along with this sketchbook. I remember standing in a field in my village painting this, using this one. So yeah, it's quite a cute little thing, and there's really, really tiny versions of these as well. This is the one that I keep in the car now for emergencies. And then I've got this little green Funto set up. And I've not had this all that long, but this has become a real favourite. And this is currently what's in my larger travel case. So this holds 9 paints. And it hasn't got a huge mixing space, but it is divided, and I found that it works well enough. I mean, you could have more mixing space in the lid, or actually use this for a little bit of water. And I had fun with the colours that I included in this palette. I didn't have your standard mixing colours in there, but I've really, really enjoyed it. I've used this one for all of the watercolour sketchbook paintings that I've done recently. And not that one, that was pastel and acrylic. So it's been nice having this green gold. Well, it's a PY150, so azo yellow. I've liked having that as my yellow in the set quite a bit. And also the Lutia orange. I'm thoroughly enjoying that as a mixing colour. And using my Lutia orange and this quinacridone permanent magenta, I was able to get this colour that I really like, that I normally carry separately, which is Daniel Smith's quinacridone burnt scarlet. But it's just got a really nice stable base. It's nice to hold. Everything fits nicely. And then it's got this cute little case, which you don't really need, but it's cute. So when I'm going out and about with the car, or if we're visiting people, and I want to take a travel case, this is the one that I take. And I've kept one leaf in it. There were more that came in it, and it's really grubby at the moment. So yeah, an assortment of pencils and mixed media. Then I'll have my water pot, some travel brushes, and then I've also got space for a watercolour palette and one of the smaller Caran d'Ache Neocolour 1 or 2 tins. So I've carried this one in here a fair bit, but at the moment this is the one that I've got in here. And if I want to, I can even fit in a smaller sketchbook. Then the final palette I've got, which is my tiniest by far. And there's a couple of size comparisons. It's like a little Vaseline lip balm tin. And this is produced by Rose Wildsmith. She sent me this for free to try out. I made my own little swatch card again. And I think she does these on a 3D printer. So they come with 2 little palettes, and they've got a little kind of bobble on top of each one, so that the top one doesn't squash directly onto the lower paints. It holds it up a little bit. But unfortunately, the bobble broke off quite easily, and so I can't pull it out as easily as I could do, whereas this one you can hold the bobble to pull it out. But that's quite a bit of paint, and it's not a tiny surface area to lift up your paint from. And I used that down at Mello one day just for this super quick one. But I used a water brush with this because I think I had these just in a pocket or something. And then finally, the last 2 types of palette I'll show you. One is this Mijello palette, and I had a few of these at one time. This is how I used to store all of my tube paints. So at the moment, this is actually paint made out of Caran d'Ache Neocolour 2s, and they've all dried out at the moment, but they'll reactivate fine. It smells amazing when I open it, because somebody had said they might go mouldy. And so I'd put a drop of essential oil in each well I used rose geranium oil, so I don't know if that's been effective or not, but they've not gone mouldy anyway. The thing I like about these wells is they've got this nice slant, so you can have quite a deep area of paint, and you can also have space to kind of wipe your brush and stuff. There are some versions of these that have got solid white inserts, but I like the clear ones so that I can put my colour chart underneath. But if you want to, you can have a huge amount of mixing space. They've got rubber in the lid, so they're pretty watertight. I've had 2 runny paint running around inside of it and it's not leaked. And they sit nice and flat and they stack well. So yeah, no complaints about this type of palette, if that's the kind of thing you're looking for. And then I've also got this palette which has got some gouache in. Again, these are quite widely available. You've got quite a big water pot, and I used this as my main water pot for quite a long time. I really liked it. And then you've got a palette area that's got like a rubber or silicone-y insert to stop the paints running into each other. So mine have dried out, but these will re-wet okay. This one has gone a bit mouldy. That's the first time I've had a paint go mouldy. So it'd be interesting to try putting my essential oils into gouache as well and see if it affects the property of it too much. But it's not a bad little palette, though it's not got the best mixing space. I prefer using gouache from the tube though, so I don't use this very much. Just to talk about travel water pots though, that folds down to that height, and you can get other collapsible watercolour pots, though they still have a bit of height left in them even when they're collapsed. So when I think it was when I was going to Nepal, I was looking for the smallest stuff possible, and I found these, I guess just kind of camping cups on Amazon, and they fold down really slim. They're bare on the bottom to stand on. And when I'm just doing small paintings, I don't even extend them the whole way, just to keep it as stable as possible. And I just pop a little bit of water in the bottom. Although it can go quite a bit bigger if you want it. But the thing I like most about these, I think, as well as the flatness, is that when I finish using it, even when you've tipped out the water, the inside's still wet. And this lid is great for keeping that in, so I can just chuck that back in my paint kit and not worry about getting everything damp inside. And as far as water goes, sometimes I'll have water with me, but sometimes if I'm going out on a not too long trip and I've just taken my small bag or shoved stuff in my pockets, then I got these kind of cosmetic bottles from Amazon again, and this works fine. It's just about enough water to do a page in my sketchbook, but that's worked pretty well. Oh, I just remembered I also had one other Winsor and Newton palette. I got rid of it in the end because although it was quite a nice design in theory, the water bottle part kept falling out and it was just a bit fiddly to use, so I don't have that anymore. I think in conclusion then, if you forced me just to pick one palette, I think it would just have to be a bog standard metal palette that I can fit 20 half pans in, and it just feels easy to use. I think some people have commented that they don't like the fact that the mixing palette doesn't sit flat. It slopes down so your paints do run down, but that hasn't bothered me too much. You can sit a little bit of paint in these four, not too badly. And then I do really quite like the Portable Painter Micro. And sometimes I like the challenge of only painting with 6 colours. And then my surprise late entrant is this little Funto one. I think 9 is a nice number of paints to have, and I don't know how to quantify the fact that it just feels pleasing to use. This is not to say that I don't like some of my other palettes as well, but these 3 are my favourites. And then just quickly, as far as travel brushes go, I really like Princeton Neptunes, and my kids had clubbed together and bought me this for my birthday present last year, so that was great. And up until I had this, my main travel brush combination was this size 12, size 10 Escoda Ultimo, which is a lovely soft one, very equivalent to the Princeton Neptunes and the Silver Black Velvets. And then this, I've had this quite a while now, this Silver Black Velvet number 6. I've also got this Escoda Perla brush, which is quite nice, but it's a little bit firmer, doesn't hold as much water as these other 3, so I haven't really tended to take it with me. Although these are quite soft brushes, I find that the smaller ones are fine for doing details. In my primarily watercolour sketchbook, as opposed to my scruffier mixed media sketchbook, I've done all of these paintings, I think with just these 2 brushes. And I think most of the ones in here were painted from this palette. So I hope that was interesting. I know I haven't talked much about prices, and that's because I can't really remember what I paid for things. I know I got this in a sale, but I think these are at least £60. Whereas these, I'm pretty sure you can get them for under 10. I think it's a very subjective thing though, depending on the way you work and what just feels good in your hand. But I would really love to hear your favourite palettes and why. Thanks ever so much for joining me. Bye!